Book 55 of 2020 was 10 Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media Accounts Right Now by Jaron Lanier. So I saw this book in Waterstones, and I'm going to be honest, I was drawn to it by the cover because it's a lovely cover, and also because it was, about social media accounts and about deleting them. And I've got this kind of like love-hate relationship with social media, where for a very, very long time I just put everything on social media. It was my form of self-expression. I'm quite introverted, and so I'm not necessarily someone who talks about myself a lot. And it was kind of a way for me to be me. And it was also a good way to kind of document what I was doing as a kind of like time capsule for myself. So to look back on memories and things like that, to, you know, for nostalgia purposes and for enjoyment purposes of thinking about all the things that I've done, and things like sharing pictures and sharing your life with your friends and things like that. But I found myself getting very addicted to it, and I've listened to lots of different things, but this book was scary. There is a Netflix documentary that's about the same thing, and Jaron Lanier is actually in it, so he's the guy with the dreadlocks. And this book, it's a very accessible book. It's not dense or anything. It's in a kind of, it's written in a conversational way, so it's very easy to kind of follow. And essentially, Lanier's kind of talking about how these free products, they're not actually free. Like, you are paying for them in some way. The purpose of social media is essentially to manipulate you, and to, its prime motivation, not if that's the right word, I was going to say that its prime goal is to get you to spend more time online, to engage you more online. And by being online, you are then more exposed to marketing, because the real kind of customers of social media are businesses that advertise things, and we are the kind of like people that are being exploited to make them money. So it's not like we are paying for the service, but we are paying for it in our data. Essentially, there are these algorithms that, and they're not even in control. They're not even controlled by the people that create them, because obviously it's just computing software. But essentially, it's adaptable in the sense that it's looking at and analysing what keeps you online and what keeps you engaged. So it will kind of look at things like, who are we engaging with? Who are we giving likes to? What kind of things are we kind of liking? What kind of things are we commenting on? How long are we looking at particular posts? And then what it's doing is it's manipulating it so that you see more of the things that keep you engaged. And this acts in a kind of positive reinforcement. So the algorithms are trying to, so positive reinforcement, if you're not sure, is psychological theory of operant conditioning, which is if you do something and you get something pleasant in return, you're more likely to continue that behaviour. So, every time you see a little notification and someone's liked something that you said, or commented positively, you're being rewarded with positive social regard. And that makes you feel good, because you feel belonging, and you feel like you're seen by other people and respected and whatever. And it's hacking into our own dopamine systems within our brain. So we're kind of positively being reinforced every time to go back onto social media to get that kind of good feeling. And we might not even, realise that this is what's happening. But this is why we have this kind of, I don't know about you, but I have this kind of like internal like compulsion to open up social media, and I have to stop myself. Like, I put measures in place on my phone to make it harder for me to go online. So things like, rather than having the button, that's not the right word, but on your phone, I put it inside like a little folder. So I have to go in the folder to press the kind of Facebook app symbol or whatever. And I move them around sometimes, because what I was finding, I was opening my phone and I was automatically going to Facebook or going to Instagram, and I didn't want to. And I opened it up and I was like, why am I on here? And it's just because you kind of almost training your brain to do that, or your brain's training. I was going to say your brain's training you, but then that we're getting into a whole kind of philosophy of the self. Let's not go there, because this will be a long video otherwise. And the interesting thing about this is that after I read this book, I really started to think about my social media usage, because as I mentioned at the beginning, I have a love-hate relationship with social media, and I do find that the longer I spend on social media, the more negative impact it has on my mental health. And I'm pretty self-aware, and I'm kind of aware of like things online and how they're triggering me, and yet I still can't stop myself from going on it. So I know it's bad for me, and I know I shouldn't be on it as much, but I just keep going on it, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? So I'm addicted to social media, and it's because I've been on social media since like 2006, like when MySpace was around. Probably before that, like probably like 2004, which is like, you know, it's like nearly 20 years on social media. Like, it's going to have a negative impact, isn't it, over that time. And what was really interesting is that when I started to limit my social media use, so I'm very impressed actually that Instagram and Facebook have got timers on them now, because I used to get a different app to time how long I was on them, but they've actually integrated it into the systems now, so you can track how long you're on it. You can put time reminders on to tell you to come off it, and I was using those to the point where I was only letting myself go on social media for like 10 minutes a day. And it was literally just opening it and closing it again. So I wasn't scrolling. I was just literally opening it, see any notifications coming back off it. You know, and even now I still only go on it to watch like videos. Like I like a Red Table Talk on Facebook, so I watch that. And then there are some videos on Instagram, because I follow a lot of like politics and stuff like that. So I only really watch that. I don't really look at anybody else's posts anymore. And so, and you know, there's a lot of people that I don't follow, even though they're my friends, because I was finding that a lot of things that they were posting were not things that I was interested in, or were things that I disagreed with, or things that I thought were quite triggering in certain instances. And not because there's anything bad with what they're doing, but it was affecting me in a kind of way. Like, an example I'll give you is that I know quite a few people that are very expressive about their mental health, and I was finding that every time someone would speak about mental health in a way that would indicate that they were struggling with their mental health, or, you know, even though they're giving kind of positive comments about it, like, or, you know, positive quotes and stuff like that, it's indicative that their mental health isn't great, because that's why they're doing it. It would trigger me to think, oh, what's my mental health like? Am I in a good place? Am I not in a good place? And I was like, I don't really need a reminder to check in, because I might have been feeling really good, but that kind of thought process then made me think, oh, maybe I'm not. And so it was triggering in that way. So I don't follow people like that, because I know for me that will have an impact on my mental health. So I'd rather not see things like that. You know, and you know, people who are like obsessed with like calories and stuff like that. Like, I have a healthy relationship with food, and I don't want that kind of thought process coming into my mind, because it's not there now. I don't want it in there. So I'm very conscious of what I expose myself to, and try not to view things that I know will have a negative impact on me that I'm not in control of. And what I noticed when I'd limited my social media, to get back onto the point that I was going to mention, which I went off on a complete tangent, was that I started getting more notifications, and they were random notifications about things that I would normally not get notifications about. It was like trying to entice me back in, and this was actually demonstrated on the documentary that I mentioned at the beginning on Netflix. They do it in a kind of like in a way that's a bit exaggerated, and kind of showing you like an example of it happening, like in like a role play kind of thing. But it was happening to me at the time, and I was like, that's really interesting. Like, if you don't believe that this is happening, then limit your usage and just watch your notifications increase. And what's interesting as well is that these notifications, they're not in real time. Like, they kind of, the algorithms work with, if you've not engaged for a bit, they'll send you notifications so that you'll go back on. So for a very, very long time, for about a year now, I've not had my notifications turned on. So for example, things like WhatsApp, I have to actually go into WhatsApp to see that someone's messaged me. Everything's muted. And Facebook as well, I have to go into Facebook to see notifications. Same with Instagram, even if somebody like messages me. The only thing that I have that kind of pops up sometimes is Facebook messages, but usually if it's like group chats and stuff, they're all muted, because I I've read a lot of different kind of social media books, and about like the damaging impacts of it and things like that. There is a lot of psychological research that shows that social media usage, as it increases, it's got a negative correlation. Your mental health decreases, and I'm very mindful of that. And what was I saying there? Just a complete like brain blank. Oh, that was it. So I don't have the notifications turned on, because my kind of approach to my phone is that I use my phone doesn't use me. And so therefore I go on the phone if I'm free to look at messages. If I'm not free, I'm not going to open any messages. And so therefore no one's kind of grabbing my time when it's not available. So I have that kind of boundary in place so that I don't feel like someone's intruding on my time, because they're just sending a message. Like, that their intention with the message is probably reply to it when you are available, but because it's intruding, you feel like you have to reply straight away, particularly if you've seen it, because then the other people that have sent the message might think that you have got a problem with them because you're not replying straight away. We've got this kind of like immediacy in our culture now that we think that somebody should reply to us if they've seen our message, and it's like there's no kind of consideration there that the person that's seen it might be very busy, but they've seen it because it's popped up and they've accidentally clicked on it or whatever. And this whole kind of idea of behaviour modification that's happening because of they're trying to get you to stay online as long as possible. They don't want you in the real world, they want you online, because that's where they can market things to you. In the real world, you would only necessarily see marketing if you walk past a billboard, or you looked at like media or whatever specifically, or you watch television. And most people don't watch television like on prime time anymore. They kind of watch it on catch up and things, and people don't really watch adverts and things. So social media is a really, really good place to market things to people. And the consequences of being on your phone all the time is that you lose contact with reality, so that you can't recognise as easily what is rubbish that's online, because you're not figuring out kind of what's actually happening in the real world. And this will affect your relationships as well, because you'll start to judge your relationships based on how they are online and not how they are in person. Sometimes you kind of think that you're friends with people because you interact with them online, and then when you meet them in person, they're not. You don't have that same relationship. And as well, the problem with being on social media all the time is that you're in an echo chamber. You'll notice that there's a lot of people that are on your social media that have similar viewpoints to you, and there's this kind of view of you don't say anything kind of inflammatory, because you'll get a lot of kind of kickback from people on it. I mean, obviously people still do that, and because you're in these kind of echo chambers as well. I mean, I'll give you an example. So when the last election happened in Great Britain, I had a lot of people on my social media who were supporting Labour, because I have a lot of teacher friends, and I don't think many teachers are conservative, because Conservatives just shit all over educational policy. And as a teacher, you see a lot of kind of social injustice and a lot of people who are, not really having a great time because of the way that society is structured. And so a lot of people on my Facebook were, voting for Labour, and were very active about speaking out about it. And I come from a family of people who support Conservative, and because I only kind of have lots of people on my social media that are for Labour, or there was more people for Labour than there were for Conservative, I was hopeful that we would win an election, but obviously that did not happen, because the majority of the country voted for Conservative. And that's really interesting, because I don't come across very many Conservatives. I do now, because I work in an area now that's heavily populated by people that voted Conservative. And now I usually am in Manchester, which is a city, and more people are kind of Labour, because you have different values when you're in a city to when you're in a town and places like that that are a little bit more affluent. So the fact that you're not coming into contact as much, and as well as this kind of thing of if someone disagrees with you, delete them, which is not really going to help anybody, because we don't really come together and talk about things, and you can't really have a conversation online anyway, because you don't have that kind of face-to-face kind of empathy with somebody. So you're not really kind of mixing with people that have different views if you're always on your phone, because you're not obviously in the real world anymore. So that's an issue. for like politics and political viewpoints. And the other thing as well is that on social media, if you've got to remember, these algorithms are trying to keep you online. What they found is that the posts that keep people online, that keep people engaged, are the ones that are antagonising, the ones that kind of cause you outrage, the ones that, you know, are like, give you an almost kind of self-righteous indignation, like, who are they to say that, and you want to disagree with them and you want to tell them what for. And a lot of the time these kind of troll comments, they're not from real accounts, and they're bots, and their aim is to keep you engaged online. And if you see something that's a troll comment, you probably will respond to it because you don't want to kind of not stick up for yourself. But actually, by doing that and just not deleting it, well, I didn't say that right, but what I meant was if you just deleted it, then that wouldn't kind of continue to happen. So it's interesting for me that, because I get a lot of troll comments on these kind of YouTube videos, and I do see that some of the accounts are like not real people, and it's just very interesting that, you know, once you get kind of a couple of troll comments, you get more in the same week, and it has had the impact where I've engaged more. So it is actually kind of, you know, it is engaging me more on the social media rather than being in the real world. So I think perhaps maybe I should just delete the comments in future, because I don't want to be manipulated by YouTube. And the other thing that Lanier talks about is that social media, of its very nature, is a kind of attention-seeking platform, because you talk about yourself, you talk about what's on your mind, you talk about your opinions, and it kind of fosters this kind of self-centered behaviour and this kind of like self-righteous entitlement to your viewpoints. It's interesting that a lot of people that are very vocal on social media are the ones that are the least informed about things, or the least educated, and, you know, there's a limited respect for people that are knowledgeable about things and that are educated. Like the amount of people that I've had troll me for things that I've said, and yet I'm thinking to myself, if we were in the real world and we were to go to a job interview together, I would get the job over you because I'm more knowledgeable and more educated than you. But yet if I put a video onto YouTube, you feel like you have the right to put me down because you think that you're better than me, and you're not. So it's very interesting that social media kind of warps people's perceptions of individuals, and because they don't know who that person is and everything that comes with that person, and they don't kind of like respond to them how they would normally. They kind of treat them with disrespect, and see them as being, you know, fair game to criticise and put down and whatever, and to almost challenge their knowledge as well, when actually they are knowledgeable. You know, it's always interesting to me because I think if I'm watching somebody and they're saying something, I don't automatically think, oh, they're wrong, they don't know what they're talking about, unless I know other knowledge that I've got from somewhere else. And even then I wouldn't comment and put that person down, because what does it matter? Like, you know, I know that what they're saying is not quite right, but, you know, what does it matter? Why would you go out of your way to try and correct someone like that? That is an indication of insecurity, isn't it, on the part of that person, that they feel the need to do that. And it is interesting that, you know, a lot of people go on social media and kind of, I don't know, just chat about themselves, and these people never, you know, when you meet them in real life, they never kind of go out of their way to find out about other people. They do always just talk about themselves, and they do always kind of like, when you have a conversation with them, they talk at you rather than having a conversation. It's very rare that they think about other people, and it's because, you know, they're brainwashed by this idea that everyone cares about what they've got to say, which in reality is just not the case. Like people in reality don't want to listen to everything that you've got to say. You have to kind of go back and forth and listen to each other. And as well, the troll behaviour, because of this de-individuation where you're online and no one knows who you are, and you can be anonymous, so people don't put their real images up and whatever, you can kind of say what you want and get away with it because there's no consequences. You know, in the real world, you can't just go up to someone and be a dick to them. Like, there's going to be consequences to that behaviour. Whereas online, it's not, nothing's going to happen to you. You can just do what you want. And so there's a lack of kind of empathy for people's feelings, and a lack of kind of, ethical treatment of people, because they're not, constrained by social norms anymore. They can express themselves however they want. Lanier also talks about how if you just look at social media and you don't look around everything that's going on around you in the world seems very terrifying. It seems like everything's irate, everything's kind of obsessive, and in fact, sorry, I'm reading my board, and I wrote this a very long time ago, and I didn't get a chance to do the video, and I'm kind of looking at it now and going, why have I wrote it like that? I think what I was trying to say is that the algorithms have discovered that if you are irate, if you're obsessed, if you divide people, and if people are angry, they make more money because there's more engagement. Because particularly as well, if there's division between groups, because you've got one group against another and it goes back and forth. And Twitter's one for this. Like, I do not have Twitter, and I would never get Twitter, because Twitter is Trollgate. Like, that is where the trolls go. That is the under the bridge. That's where they live. And it's always kind of back and forth, and people are trigger happy, aren't they? And they feel like they need to have their voice and their say without taking a step back and thinking, is it necessary? Like, a piece of advice that I was given for something completely unrelated was, pick your battles. You don't have to battle with everybody. You just pick the ones that are the most important to have. And I think a lot of people on Twitter really need that advice. If you have a lack of context and you don't know really what's going on in the world, you'll be more susceptible to believing what you're seeing online. And this is why a lot of people believe fake news, and the posts that you see are manipulated. They're manipulated to, when you kind of like type in Google, the results that you get are not the same as what everyone else gets. Like, they depend on where you are, and they depend on your previous search history. And this is why, I don't know if you ever tried this, but if you go on a computer that's not the one that you usually use, your search results, like what you're normally used to searching, will not be the same. They'll be different. And it's scary to think that my newsfeed that I see on social media is not the same as what everybody else sees, even if we've all got the same friends. Like, it's showing me more stuff from certain people than others. And not because I like them more, maybe because I'm more antagonised by them. So it's kind of like trying to get you to engage more, and it does it with any means. So it's not necessarily to make you happy, it could be to make you sad, whatever. There's an algorithm as well that, potentially these algorithms could almost like prey on people that are depressed, for example, because when a person's depressed, what they might do is engage more online to talk about how they're feeling depressed, talk about how they're feeling, and that gets a lot more interaction from lots of other people as well. And so in the future, what's going to happen is they can make you feel depressed so that you'll engage more. So they might expose you to more kind of social comparisons that they know will make you feel worse about yourself, because they know that then you'll engage. I'm not saying that the algorithms do this on purpose, it's a data thing. They're looking at, okay, what things lead to what's the cause and effect. So if they show you this thing, you then do this thing, but the algorithm doesn't know that the thing that they're doing to you is that they're making you depressed by doing social comparisons, and then you're engaging more. So it's a worrying thing that you can be manipulated without even realising it, and there's no control over it because it's a computer and it's doing it with data. So there's no ethics like around this. And you can be manipulated with this fake news as well. Things like, if the algorithms pick up that you like conspiracy theories, they'll show you more, and then you will like to believe them and like all the different things and be part of kind of groups and things. And you can be targeted with election information, who gets to see what election information. We always kind of think like, why are people voting for certain parties? Like, do they not know all these things? And no, they don't, because what you see on your newsfeed is not what other people see. What you see on your Google searches is not what they see. If somebody who's a conservative goes and Googles something, they'll probably find support for their opinion. Whereas if I go and I'm Labour, then I'm probably going to find support for my information. And so everyone's seeing different things, which means that we don't understand why people can't see it, because we don't realise that they can't see it. And so this is kind of like worrying, because you just end up thinking that the person's a moron, and that's not the case. It's just that you've had different information and you just haven't had a conversation with it because you're talking online and not in real life. So it's very, very difficult to empathise with someone when you don't know what they don't know. You know, if you realise that they didn't know what you knew, then you would understand why they probably got that viewpoint. And it's very, very interesting as well that all the people that work in tech that are responsible for things like social media, who have children, limit their own and their children's use of social media. And if that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what will.